welcome along to LairMedia.tv, and the programme is The Past Awake, and this edition is devoted to Mr. John Connors, prominent historian all the way from Borrisley. John, welcome to this programme.
Welcome, Pastor. Great to meet you.
I'm delighted, and I heard so much about you. I won't tell you everything I heard.
Has a mixture of the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So yourself, John, did you grow up in Borrisley?
I did indeed. Our family would be from Borrisley, go back as far as we can find records. So,
oh my God.
Yeah. So we one of the old families in Borrisley.
Yeah, and growing up, what gave you a love of history? When did that start at all? Was it always there?
It was there as long as I can remember. I give some of it to my father, but mostly I would give the credit to my mother's father, my grandfather. Now, I suppose I could say maybe he was into history, but he was an extreme Republican, is what he was. He was going very hard, he was. And he'd take me up to the prospect of the bike, going off maybe to different commemorations. And he'd be singing the songs, he had the vast array of songs, of course. You would be wasted on the young. I didn't listen to them or remember most of them, but just the love of war of independence and revolutionary history. Now, I have to give a bit of credit to my father as well, Lord Domestic and all of them now. My father was one of the cynics, he would be a man to be leaving ghost stories. Everything was a kind of common sense with him. But he was a postman. And at the time, the postman used to go around with bicycles. So they worked on Saturday. And of course, on Saturday, I'd tag along with my little bike. I'd be passing places, and he'd show me there was an ambush there. There was a black and tan hill there.
Right.
And this tortured man there, his kid, they made out he was a spy, And I kind of, that's all generation, that kind of interest in me, So that's where it came from.
And you're right, John, because you and I myself are around the same age anyway, I'd say, because we grew up in the same time. And as you know, I don't have to tell you, most households that we grew up in were divided.
Oh, yes.
They were either treaty or anti-treaty. That was it. And that took its toll. That took its toll on neighbours, as you said, in parishes and all that.
Yeah.
People would avoid talking to people for years and years and years,
I suppose too, some of that caused, well, they said the dissemination of history. I kind of had it on, I suppose, maybe a distorted perception of history. Now, I kind of talk liberally about it, which I remember well, the 1966 Easter Rebellion commemorations. And I remember as a young man in school, the master tried to get me to read the proclamation, but the words were too big for me. But the poor master, God be with him, like he had this obsession with Patrick Pearson, the blood sacrifice, and giving your life for Ireland.
Yeah.
I'm sure I look back and notice all the kind of rose tinted because it was, I suppose it was a shandy or a mixture between propaganda, politics, and history.
Yes, it was mixed in a bit, and as you mentioned there, the 50th anniversary in 1966, there was a huge pageant in Mallow Racecourse. I'm sure you know where that is. And all the schools, we were all dressed up as Cuchulainn warriors, and Devil Era came down, and it passed over my head. It was a huge affair, pomp and ceremony. Yeah. I liked it. Of course, as kids, we love all that, There was ice cream and sweets and drinks and all for us. But it was marked. Now, I know the COVID has impinged on some of the ceremonies, but nevertheless, I feel that the government has done nothing last year, and they have no plans to do anything meaningful this year either, which is really in our history, John, isn't it?
You say, Pat, I preach this relentlessly. Don't look to central government to mark the commemoration of history.
Right.
And we're going to believe in community. And if there's only 5 people in a parish, if there's only 2 people in a parish, get together to commemorate what's happened in that parish. At least it's marked. Because, look, we go back to the very beginning of the foundation of this state. And I just diverge a little bit here, and I talk about, say, as based in Limerick there at the moment, one great Limerick, Donegal Hannigan. And, you know, Dan Breen, Denny Lacey, the Tipperary, and the all famous Salmon story. Well, what happened to Donegal Hannigan, who was second only to Tom Barry in the results he achieved in the War of Independence? What happened to poor Donegal Hannigan was he joined the National Army, a no government under W.T. Cosby.
The Free State Army, is it?
Yeah, Free State Army. You know, the no government couldn't forget about quickly enough, you know, especially W.T. Cosby. His input as both personally was small enough.
Yeah.
Well, Hannigan, you know, one of the great, not only one of the greatest leaders of the War of Independence, you know, in the Civil War, no executions followed him. Never got the credit as a contributor to our national freedom. So people have been filtered out, and I just get a case in point for Hannigan. So a kind of revisionism is kind of a dirty word as far as our history is concerned.
That's
But I agree with you. Say, to have O'Hannigan included, to have his name remembered, you know, many like him, that's not revisionism. That's telling the story as it always should have been told. You know?
You're spot on, John. You're spot on. And there's been many, thankfully, as you said, there's been many local marking of, what's the word I'm looking for, anniversaries and local parishes, local historical societies. And I know I interviewed Siofra O'Donovan, who's the grandniece of Kevin Barry, you know, and she published her book there, and they've had their own celebrations as well. And recently I spoke to Tim Pat Coogan.
Yes.
But I'll have to do another program with him because we didn't cover his books on Collins and everything. We just covered general things. But he's all those people are interesting as historians, you know. And Tim Pat was sidelined for a while, you know. Because
indeed. No, I just continue, just from there. I said about this, that was O'Hannigan. That was the beginning state, say 1922, 23, around there. That was one man's portion out of history, by his own. Now, bring on that onto the centenary of Salahead Beg. And whether we like it or not, you know, times have changed. Certainly a good thing that we're not cavalier about the loss of human life. But we cannot deny that what happened in Salahead Beg is a central component of our national history. Now, like the national government were pretty wanting in their contribution to that. Now, it was a great local effort, you know, and a lot of people turned up, you know. But something like without Salahead Beg, Pat, like it or not, we would be living in a different Ireland today. And I don't think I can categorically say that the government did not do that to justice that it deserved. You know,
well, you'll get no argument from me in that respect, John, because Salahead Beg is obviously, together with the GPO in 1916 and one or two more events, are seminal events in our history, and they should be marked as such. Now, despite the fact that we have COVID, they can still be marked. But of course, I didn't know much about Seán Hogan apart from the song. His name is mentioned in the song because I saw many interviews with Dan Breen, particularly one that Cathal O'Shannon did back in the early 60s with Dan Breen, and recently I watched the one with Tom Barry as well in RTE, you know. But Dan's fuller than life characteristic probably overshadowed everyone around him. But nevertheless, Seán Hogan and of course Sean Tracy, Ty Crowe, Patrick McCormack, Patrick O'Dwyer, and Michael Ryan. They're all good Tipperary names when you hear them there, you know.
Indeed. Indeed.
And when you were going about this book, John, which is, I never brought along my copy to the studio, but anyway, when you were doing this book, you obviously got a chance to speak to direct people, directly involved relations with Seán Hogan. How forthcoming were they? How cooperative were they to you? Did you find it easy?
Extremely cooperative. And I was fortunate. I had the book well underway, and I had taken it for granted that Seán Hogan's 3 sons were dead.
All right.
I had taken it for granted, you know, when I began.
Yeah.
So what happened then was just like something lands in your lap when you're least expecting it, and God, I couldn't believe it. Then they make a contact with Seán Hogan Jr. in a place called Simpson's Hospital in Dublin, in Ballantyre in Dublin. He was a patient there in nursing home, and he was absolutely delighted to
Go away. And what age was he that time?
86.
Oh, because.
He was 86. And now, I made several trips to Dublin because there's some days he didn't want to talk about his father, because he wanted to talk about Tipperary hurling, and he wanted to talk about politics, and some days he didn't want to talk at all. But, but I persevered.
Yeah.
And then I made contact with a man called Tracy Hogan, who would be a grandson of Seán Hogan's. And Tracy Hogan, he had so much of the family papers, memorabilia, stuff that was handed down through the.
Yes.
Tracy made that. He made it accessible to me. I could get what I wanted, use what I wanted, and because extreme, I think perhaps what it was, or I know what it was, is the reason I wrote the book, because I felt Seán Hogan was forgotten. And I'm sure his family felt the same. That he was portrayed as no more than a big player or a mascot in a bigger game,
John, people forget easily, as you and I both know, I mean, they must remember that in 1919, it's not how big. Seán Hogan was only 18, wasn't it?
Yes.
And he was I was reading about him now because this was coming up, but I mean, he was fearless.
Oh, yes. And look, same. I suppose like any team or whatever, I suppose there's only room for so many
stars,
so many egos. There, this is what the way I put it. But Seán Hogan, I suppose, he was relegated, that big player he was. But the plans for Salahead Bay were made in a little galvanised dairy on a farm in Green Island. Belonged to Hogan's cousins, other Hogans.
Yeah.
And from the very early times, Seán Hogan was part of that group. He was. His mother used to send down her younger son Matthew down with the tea and the bread, the fellas in the tin horse. So Seán Hogan was a central part of that cadre of fellas who met there, who made those plans. And included that would be Dan Breen, Sean Tracy, Vinnie Lacey. The well-known, the well-known major players of the time.
Yeah.
All of that.
Ned O'Brien, yeah.
Ned O'Brien would have been Galway. Hold on to Pat, the great men of East Limerick, some of the great forgotten men of the War of Independence.
Yes.
And I researching the Seán Hogan book, I came across all these fellas: Jimmy Stanton, Sean Lynch, Ned O'Brien, Liam Frank, and
I know.
Much to my what can I say? The contribution that these fellas gave to that war effort. Amazing men, amazing people.
Yeah.
So hold on, big pride onto those great men of East Limerick.
And there's a couple of more books, John. Is there some more people in the locality that you could be looking at? Is there?
I would like to write about Dan Breen. Now, people say, is there enough written about it? The reason I like to write about Dan Breen is maybe like some of these self-help books or whatever. Would the real Dan Breen please stand up? And if I ever do get to write it, I would probably title Dan Breen Controversial and Complex, because my God, he was certainly complex, if nothing else.
Indeed. Of course, then, John, after Salahead, for our listeners, this is, they became, martial law was declared in the area, and of course, they became absolutely hunted men,
yes,
as they say in the song, and they became, not outlaws, but they became, well, there was a price on their heads, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then Seán Hogan himself, wasn't he? He was captured.
The story of that, there was a dance held in the house of a man called Eamon O'Dear, in a place called Ballard. That'd be the parish of Clonout, as we know.
Yeah.
The purpose of the dance apparently was a fundraiser to buy a revolver, and the big four, as we would have called it that time, Dan Breen, Seán Hogan, Seamus Robinson, and Sean Tracy, they went to this dance. Now, even though Hogan might have been the youngest of them, like he certainly had his way with Manana hair. Apparently a good looking young fella, like with a good story to tell.
Absolutely.
And at this dance, he met with the Brady O'Keefe, and he was supposed to be staying in O'Keefe's house that night, but apparently, I'd imagine not with the persuasion of too much arm twisting. He consented to bring her to the house of her cousins, Maher's of Anfield.
Right.
Yeah, and it was the next morning there. Maher's house had been raided on a regular basis by Dorothy. And no, there's a reason for that, Pat. Is Malay's hardware store told us the strong room apparently had a revolving door, and as soon as the jelly dynamite and arms were deposited in the strong room, they were leaving us quick. But the reason for that is because the man that was in charge was a member of the volunteers, and Sergeant Peter Wallace of Roskean, he believed, not without and with good reason, that this stuff has been hidden in Maher's of Anfield, and that was the cause of his early morning raid.
And there was Sean.
Yes, yeah.
Now, of course, another famous thing happened then, as you know, when he was being transported to Dublin. The famous Knocklong raid.
Yes,
happened.
yeah. You know, like to me, it was a great change. It was a great pivotal point of the War of Independence. You know, we talk about wanted men. Like you go back to 1919, you had four men with a price of £1,000 each in their head.
A lot of money.
A lot of money then. Now, a few fellas did attempt to collect it, all right, but without success. But, you know, you have to look at something else as well. Like Sinn Féin, they say, or say Nationalist Ireland in general. It was like they weren't all pro ambush or pro assassination or whatever. No, like Sinn Féin was a political party. You know, 1916 was erroneously called the Sinn Féin Rising. You know, but what happened after Salahead Beg? You know, houses were being raided, martial law was declared, you had no affairs, you know, all of this, you know, people being arrested and turned in prison, whatever. And now, not everybody would look favourably on what happened to Salahead Beg, but nobody could deny the courage and bravery and fortitude that was involved in the rescue of Hogan at that long, you know.
Well, that was sensational.
Sensational, you know. And, you know, like, men who would put their life on the line, you know, for a young comrade, like, you know, it wouldn't be appropriate to call their actions cowardly anymore. So it was a huge, to me, it was a great turnout, and something else as well. There was two police casualties, Sergeant Peter Wallace, Roscommon man, and Michael Enright, Constable Michael Enright, actually buried in Manchester in Limerick, there outside Cork. The two of them were killed. And there was an inquest held in Kilmallock into the killings. And the jury returned them. The District Inspector McLean, he called in the jury to return a verdict of willful murder by persons unknown. And the jury actually refused to do that. And they brought in, I suppose, a wishy-washy kind of a verdict. But also they brought in this rider, you know, that's calling on the authorities not to be raiding the homes of decent people between 8 o'clock in the evening and 8 o'clock in the morning. And you know, like, so much conflict is run in the realm of propaganda. And can you imagine what that was for the nationalist movement? You know, and what happened there, like so many other you know, town force atrocities took place, and juries were not one bit shy of our bringing in these very damning fabrics about. You know,
No, they were not. And you're right there, John. I'm speaking with John Connors on the Past Week as a program on our media. And John is the author of the recently published Seán Hogan. And it's still available. I was looking online. It's still available on Amazon and all good spots for it. And it's a cracking book. And everybody should have it. Anybody who is even a passing interest in history, it's a cracking book. And well done, John, to you. This period of our history from we're talking about the period in the run-up to the signing of the treaty. That's the period we're talking about, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Now, of course, the signing of the treaty and all that, but and the tragedy that happened after is even still spoken about today, even though it's 100 years ago. You know.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And the problem. People who fought side by side in this period had to make awful choices after the treaty was foisted upon us, in that they had to fight each other. I mean, that was a tragedy, John, you know?
A tragedy of the highest order. And I just deviate from my own man, Seán Hogan, and just say again something about Dan Breen. I just have huge respect for Breen. Dan Breen done more than anybody to avert a civil war. His heart wasn't in the civil war.
No.
And when the rift took place, he done more than anybody to bring the healing to that division that took place. And it wasn't without reason that the first Republic to take his seat in the Dáil in 1927, even though he lost out the subsequent general election because of that. So, no matter what might come out in interviews about his own books or statements or whatever, that is something that can never be taken from the man. You know, he made a huge valiant effort to avoid that tragedy that was the Civil War.
Yeah, I read a bit about that, and I read a bit about Dan Breen. We'll talk about there, and Dan himself in a few interviews, certainly the one I looked at recently that he gave, I think it was back in the 60s sometimes. And jeepers, I mean, you could still see in the man's face that the sadness that he felt about that event. I mean, he was still absolutely in regret of it, you know.
Just some a little story that you mentioned, Ned O'Brien.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about brother against brother. Ned O'Brien took the Republican side in the Civil War. His brother John Joe joined the Free State Army at the rank of captain.
Yeah.
John Joe O'Brien was based in Galway, in his own native village of Galway, and he was in a precarious position there because he was surrounded on all sides by hostile forces, and he got word from headquarters, army headquarters, to leave Galway and go to Cork.
Yeah.
Before they took possession of the barracks in Cork, they were taken prisoner by a group of Republicans coming retreating from the Battle of Limerick, and they were marched down to the train station Palastrine. And I have a story in my book about that, which small bit amusing. Now, John Joe O'Brien, Liam Hayes, and Joe Graham from Castle Connell.
Yeah.
Those three, and there's two more. They were ultimately taken to Victoria Barracks in Cork. And there was a threat that Cork would be invaded by Free State forces from the sea. And the Republicans resolved that if such did happen, the prisoners would be taken out and executed. And Dan Breen got to hear about this. And he went down to Cork, and he went into Victoria Barracks, and he signed bills of safe passage for the 5 Free State army officers.
Prisoners.
The prisoners. And he took them over to barracks and brought them to the railway station in Clanmire. And he was supposed to point to the track and said, Dublin is that way. You know, so
God, that's an incredible act.
Yeah.
At that time, because not alone was he doing something that he could have been shot for,
yeah, yeah. Do you know,
himself.
yeah, this is something I like about Brian and John Joe O'Brien, these people, is the friendships trumped ideology.
They do, they do, they
Now,
do. And of course, the tragedy, I don't have to tell you, John, the tragedy, I mean, it was a war, look, at the end of the day. The Civil War was a war. That's what it's called, the Civil War. We know that. And the tragedy to me, being a Corkman, being from Cork, was that Michael Collins was shot almost outside where he grew up, you know, which is a tragedy in itself. But nevertheless,
yeah,
he felt, I don't know, there's so many stories. Look, we could be here till the cows come home, but I always contended that Michael Collins himself personally, and I have no reason for saying it, but I felt it, because he was driving down familiar roads in West Cork where he's from, he felt safe. People were saying, oh, he was sitting in an open top car. Why wouldn't he be? Sure, this is the place where he grew up.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Never suspected for a minute.
He was,
shouldn't have, but he never did.
yeah, he was among his own.
Yes, indeed. And as you know, that's where the most danger is most of the time.
Exactly, exactly. You know, but you know, it shows the caliber of these people. Like, you know, like he trusted his former neighbors. You know, like, you know, like that was the mindset of you know, the decency that was inherent to the man himself. You know.
I know, yeah. I know.
You know, so.
I think there has, I mean, there's no doubt he was a fantastic organizer, a great general, and all of that. And the tragedy is he was dead at 32. And
yeah,
we don't know what would have come out of it. We just don't know. What we have today now at the moment is very sad.
Yeah, I suppose something I'd say about that 32. And I can say this about Seán Hogan and all of those people. Like these were an amazing generation. Like, at the very minimum, they gave 5 years of their young life to something that they believed. So, you know, politically today, maybe I might agree with maybe but decide maybe the some took, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I hope I'd be broad-minded on all of these things, you know. I look from a historical perspective. But we cannot deny that to give them 5 years, that's a long time of your life, you know, the best years of your life to
and you're right.
Yeah, every ounce of your energy.
Exactly, the years where you should be having fun, as they say. Yeah. Well, he was having some other kind of fun, but Seán himself, Seán Hogan, he was from outside Tipperary, wasn't he? Tip Town? Or
yeah, born at Green Island, just at I suppose. I'm always kind of constant about Townsland, you know, that the people in West Limerick might know that might be taught, but a place called Green Island, to the north of Tipperary town.
North, oh yes.
A little concise area that the same Sean Tracy, Vinnie Lacey, Dan Breen, you know, some major players of that period came from, I say maybe a radius of 5 miles.
They were almost parish.
Almost parish.
Almost one parish of all of them. It's just incredible when you think about it, you know. Just incredible. And he's buried in St. Michael's Cemetery, is it?
He's buried in St. Michael's Cemetery, buried with his parents. He's buried with his parents.
And did he die? I know he was living in Dublin. Was he living in Dublin when he died, or was he back down in Tip?
If I could, maybe I might give you a brief run through of his life subsequent to the Civil War.
Yes.
He did take a moderately active part in the Civil War, you know.
Yeah.
Now, when the guns fell silent, he came back to Tipperary, and he married a girl that he met when he was on the road, a girl called Christine Butler. And now, Seán Hogan, he done Forgivable in that's got to do in rural Ireland. You can do what you want, but do you ever hear the expression that he let go of the old place? You see,
yes.
When Seán Hogan was fighting the empire, so to speak, his brother Matthew looked after the bit of land, the farm. And then Seán be the eldest when that was all finished. Just on ceremonies, we took that as a big thing, but to be the normal back then. Seán Hogan came home, he took possession of it with his wife, and Matthew had to go off and find his own way in life. So
I see.
No, you see, in 1934, De Valera rejuvenated Land Commission, and Seán Hogan swapped his farm in Green Ant in Raleigh for a place up in Ackboy in County Meath, a place called Woodtown. Now,
all right.
Now, Hogan, I suppose, like, he had a bit of a sense of grandiosity about himself, so the big glebe house kind of suited the image, and he also got a job in the Board of Works as a supervisor of cleaners and a head messenger in the houses of
in the Board of Works. Yeah.
Yes. So it went pretty well in life, but then he went on. He moved from there to Selbridge in Kildare, a place called Knocklong House. And when I was researching this, I could, funny enough, when I went up to Ackboy, I met people who actually knew him and actually knew his mother when she lived.
Oh yeah.
They were old people, but I actually knew him. When I went to Selbridge, where he was later, I found it very hard to make contact with people, but I found a few who had a recollection of him. But even where records go, like I could find all the stuff, different things that was involved in this and that, mostly with the hunt. He had a number of stallions, so kind of a stud farm, I suppose. And then all of a sudden, every record seemed to stop. And 2 months after, he turns up in the house of his friend Seamus Robinson in Dublin. By that time, the same marriage and all that had disintegrated, So
he was on his own.
He was on his own. And I picked up the trail again, the son of John Joe O'Brien, a man called Stan O'Brien. I happened to meet Stan, and Stan O'Brien remembers him living with the Robinsons. And to Stan O'Brien actually found him the flat in North Great Georgia Street, incidentally where David Norris is living now, in the same house. And David Norris is showing me the room and all there.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
He had a flat in David Norris's house. Well, it wasn't his den, but you know what I mean. I know what you mean. Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, right. Kind of.
He's there on his own. But is he doing anything with himself? No.
At this stage, I suppose living off his IRA pension. He had a pretty good pension. He was estranged from his wife and his family, but maybe not so much his family, because Tracy Hogan would remember him well, going in and meet in Parnell Street and to go down to the scout shop, and all of that. Like, he was pretty eccentric, at this stage. He could go to his son Hugh for the dinner, but they go to call him in for the backyard, and he gone back into town at the bus, I made contact with a woman who worked in Ranks, the head office of Ranks in Parnell Street, and she's actually living in Sligo now. And, it's amazing how these things happen. And
I know.
When she was an 18-year-old, he used to call into the office and he'd get her to type bits of poems and different things like that, and she actually knew him very well. So she had great stories to tell about him, she had. But same with this, like, he went from his farm in Green Ant. He went from there to Woodtown in Ackboy. Had the horses and the stud and all of that. From there to Selbridge.
Yes.
From there to North Great Georgia Street. And that's where he died. Like,
did he actually die in Dublin?
He actually died in Dublin. He died on Christmas Eve. He collapsed on the steps of the house on Christmas Eve of 1968. Now, and he was taken to Jervis Street Hospital.
And he was young. He was young man, near enough.
Young enough. And he had picked up a wound for the War of Independence, and that he never got treated, and gangrene set in. But he actually died from the brain hemorrhage. But now, I say, when I kind of take that chronology, of his life, the pattern of his life.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
And go back, we said to the early days of solid head back,
Yes.
even before that. So to me, Hogan's life sums up a story both told and untold. And in this is Solihead Beg and Knocklaw, Ashtown, all of that. You have courage, bravery, undoubted heroism.
Without a shadow of a doubt, yes. Without a shadow of a doubt, yeah.
The silent story that goes in tandem with that is the wider impact. Like even just say the wound that he picked up in the War of Independence was never treated.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
Now that was physical, but not so much mental. But that's there too. But emotion.
Yes. Yes.
And I've come to the conclusion that Seán Hogan went out to Solihead Beggins. He lay behind the ditch. A number of shots were discharged, and 2 policemen fell dead. Seán Hogan, in common with some of the four of the participants, went on the run.
Yeah.
I contend that he stayed on the run until he collapsed outside his place in Knockmere, Georgia Street in 1968. Like the man was never comfortable where he was in life.
I know. I mean, from what you outlined there,
Yeah.
when from the time when he brought his wife into the farmhouse in Tipperary, and then he always was a restless spirit in that he was in, as you said, he was in Meath, he was in Selbridge, he was in Dublin. You're right there. I suppose that happened. I suppose there was no knowledge of what they call now, this when you get affected with post-traumatic stress disorder. That was unheard of. So people were given medication to sleep, but however.
Just think this. Soldiers came home from the First World War. They came home from the misery of the trenches. Many of them, the only, I suppose, kind of help could get would be in the form of a bottle of whiskey that they could lay their hands on.
Yeah.
Like, so much of the killing was done maybe somebody popped their head up over a trench, we say a mile or 2 miles. But the killing in the War of Independence was what I would describe it as up close and personal.
Yes.
Now, so you take Solihead Bay. You're talking at the very most 4 or 5 yards between the fallen policeman and the ambushers. Like at Knocklaw, how much closer are you going to get? Hogan was sitting beside the policeman.
And many of these later on, they knew each other, even though they were enemies. Many of these went to school together. People forget that. Many of these men, young men and boys, grew up together, played together, socialized together, and then they found themselves, as you said, at opposite ends of the conflict. Which had an awful effect on people, that you're expected to go out and shoot the chap you were sitting in class beside.
Yes. I
mean, people don't think of the human cost that had on people,
Indeed. And it's sometimes, like, we can talk about the heroism, I have no doubt about it, but I'd always kind of caution is to take any I suppose, to promote the loss of human life, spilling the blood as something to be celebrated. It's something that did happen. We can't deny it. We're country born in blood. We can't deny that.
No. I mean, we have to remember people who made the ultimate sacrifice, who went out, and we are. I suppose we have some kind of freedom today that they did not enjoy for long periods of their own lives, So you have to put it in context, as you said, John, in the historical context just setting in. But you shouldn't forget. You shouldn't forget or ignore. You should remember them in the context of the time that it happened, and be grateful for people's sacrifice as well, you know.
Oh yes, yes. You know, I suppose the history of English activity in Ireland, we were ruled by a succession of coercion acts. Now, just think of something Tipperary. You had, we say, the Fenian Rising in 1867. You had a number of minor skirmishes around Tipperary, one at Ballyhurst, one at Longstone, one at Assembly. What was the British response to that? To build a barracks in Tipperary town that would be more in line with the Punjab in India, or, you know, so the sledgehammer to crack the doors. And this is how England always reacted. You know, the same way, like, you know, 2 policemen were killed at Salahead Bay, but everybody in West Tipperary didn't kill the policeman, you know.
Yeah.
There's, you know, so the English reaction.
Well, they never learned from their own history. You're dead right. They never learned. I mean, you look at the 1916 Rising, not to put a too fine a point on it. I mean, we all know, looking back, that the very minute they shot some of those leaders, that was the end of their stay here in this country. I mean, really, it didn't have popular support, the Rising. You know, it had some support, but the very minute they started killing people, that really finished it. You know? They did the same. They did the same in India. You know, the horrific South Africa, wherever they were. I don't know anyway.
But you take it, you say, with, you know, bring down to the War of Independence, like the reprisals, you know, an ambush would take place. You know, for instance, after, I'm open to correction on this now, but I don't know too far out, but when D.I. Potter was taken prisoner and killed, they said towards the end of the War of Independence, either 14 or 16 official reprisals took place because of that. And that meant the burning and destruction of homesteads. So, you know, so that you know, way out of proportion to the incident that gave impetus to that.
Yeah.
And just not only to play, but like you can trace this right across Cork, all in one step, you can. So, like, it's really, that's the reaction, but there's overreaction to
yes. And now, John, obviously with today, I mean, is there an active historical society up around where you are?
No, there is. Let's see, any fellow could remember one, but I kind of remember two. Is this.
What are they?
No, one of is Boris Lee Historical Society, and I'll mention another one first. Is Tipperary in a Decadal Revolution, a little small group of an intimate group, and that consists of John Flannery from Niana, and a man called Seán Hogan, another Seán Hogan. Seán wrote a book called The Black and Tans in North Tipperary.
Right.
He'd be familiar to most of your viewers.
Limerick Historical Society, yes.
No, he'd be in another capacity. He's the man who comes onto television there with their team there when we get floods and fires and storms to tell us how to mind ourselves. So he coordinates that group with us.
Because. That's good.
So we have a little group there. Now COVID has kind of interfered with our plans. But what we do is we do, you know, we take an incident, we say that happens somewhere, and we do a walk and tour of that area.
Right.
And we print a 36-page booklet or whatever, you know, on that.
Yeah.
We've done quite a few of them. We do bus tours of West Tipperary and North Tipperary as well, like, you know, for different historical societies.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Now, something that's very important with that is we're very, I suppose, we're certainly non-political, you know.
Yes.
For instance, we done one there early last year, January, to mark and commemorate a number of events that happened in Thurles, say back in 100 years. Now, there was a constable killed there, a man called Luke Finnegan from Williamstown in Galway. And actually 5 members of the Finnegan family turned up for that. Now, just think of the context of this. This was only weeks after the battle with the thing that was at Dublin Castle.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh,
Jesus, yeah.
So now 5 members of that Finnegan family turned up, and they felt comfortable there, and people were comfortable with it,
Yeah, because as you said, it's very important. The local aspect mark these events as well, without trumpets and bells and whistles.
Yeah. Now, we say in Borsaley Historical Society, then we have an old graveyard. We have a bit of obsession with old graveyards. But we have an old graveyard called Glen Keegan, and a number of, I suppose, prominent people throughout history are buried there. I like to think of it as a microcosm of Irish history. And one man that's buried there is a man called Seamus Buck of Loch Forest. And Seamus Buck was one of the 4 Tipperary TDs of the first hour. So we have that. So my activity in Borsaley Historical Society kind of centers much around that. And,
yes.
But my War of Independence stuff is Tipperary in the Decade of Revolution. And we publish our own works.
And before we finish up for this edition, John, we'll definitely, I'll say this is only going to be the first of many. You won't get away that easy. We'll have to have you on. We'll have to have you on again in a few weeks' time, John. And hopefully we'll be able to physically meet soon because of this carry-on. God, Jesus, terrible. But the book, again, for our listeners and our viewers, is Seán Hogan.
Seán Hogan, A Troubled Journey.
Seán Hogan, that's right, I have it written down here. Seán Hogan, A Troubled Journey, and John Connors is the man who put all that wonderful book together, lads. Any serious historian or people who are interested in history, take a look. It'll be in the libraries as well, but and buy it. It's only a few bob. It's not very expensive. It'll be a lot cheaper than Netflix or Sky Television for you, and you'd have it forever. Is that right, John?
Well, I got a review down in the Tipperary Historical Journal. The man there, he had a bit of a criticism with it, and which I would agree with him, because no matter who I write about, I'm always sympathetic to my subject, because
of course, we're all human.
Yeah, I see human with human frailty, and now, but I would have to admit, that I was maybe a little bit more benign or charitable to Hogan in his leadership of number 2 flying column than I should have been. But how was that? But anyway, the reviewer, he said the most important thing of all. He said anybody has an interest in the War of Independence in Tipperary, they should not have a bookshelf without it. So
well, that's very good. And how did it go for you? Did it go well?
Going well. And of course, you see, as mostly offload these things are commemorations. And, for instance, in Knocklang, their yearly event in Knocklang, that's a great avenue for me to maybe sell a few 100 books. Of course,
fantastic. And at the end, when we're putting up this show eventually, John, we'll put a link on to where your book is available as well online to purchase. It's fantastic.
Yeah, because online as well.
Yeah, we've come to the end of this one, John, and really, I don't know how to thank you because it's fantastic to have you. And I heard so much about you. All good. I heard so much about you before, but we'll have you on again, John, if you're willing to do that. And if you want to invite 1 or 2 of your friends from that other group, we could do that as well, John.
Please, certainly appreciate that. So please.
So I will give you a buzz in a couple of days, and we might put that together as well. To sure. What else have we to do? Only look out the window.
Pat. I always had this feeling like if I had, if I was under less pressure, I had a bit more time. That bestsellers would be dripping out of me. But I found there when I was coming in there maybe at 6 o'clock, like have a bit to eat, do a few bits, sit down maybe and do a bit of writing maybe around 8:30 and stay till 11:30. I was doing a lot more. Like this too much of the free time is no good. It's not good, you know. So,
So you tend to ramble rather than
yeah,
be concise. Yeah.
I tell you what happens, Pat, when I'm looking up the newspaper articles, for example.
Yeah.
If I come across a hurling match that played the same week, that has to be looked at as well. So,
Yes.
So
There you go, John.
I insist I know that happens. But how is that, Pat? I'm thankful again.
And John, we hope to see more of you now, John, now that we've made contact. And I said, from this edition of The Past Awake on Lir Media, from our very special guest, John Connors, it's been a pleasure having you along. And thank you very much again for participating. And until we meet again, take care and goodbye and good luck.